ñin feŋol lampi kaŋ iman kaspawo jibe kaspawo fila banta ko do fila ila kaspawo sanna
ko to bar suwo ko tale ko pastor ngam Mamadou kumandi ba hello Mamadou abijan dron ko tarande du ko rimbalal yende manan kaspa wala say ha bantale hadi fentiji yo okay ma batuna abarka ba kayame
Maria
no
ite Mamadou batara no bantala banko kan nyadi le ka kaspawo kine te jang say
ngodo fe malon ko balu ya kala ko tan ibe bantala banko kan dawoda ese kaspawo kino kana gamleja ado abe tariyari nyami abe soniyari wala fananya
inyanta min kela doron wala ka log onto www.baluwo.com ye prepaid electricity sang min ka bonale electricity company solto min bale Gambia banko kanjang Senegal Mali Nigeria and Sierra Leone.
Dear viewers, good afternoon everybody, and if you are watching right now, this is another edition of iAfrica Top 3 program. We are discussing a lot of issues tonight of global importance and sub-regional importance as well as national importance on this 1 hour. So with me is the EU delegation head in the Gambia, European Union Ambassador to the Gambia, Atila Lajos, who will be with me to discuss EU-Gambia relationship, EU-Africa relationship, and all issues around COVID-19 democratization process and the way forward. Achievements so far will be on this program tonight. Just to take it up, you know, this program is coming a weekend after the European Union celebrated the 70th anniversary of its formation, the Showman, you know, declaration. So welcome, congratulations on the 70th. And welcome to the program also to say welcome to the viewers.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from the studio of the iAfrica TV in Velingara. I am really privileged to be here and to be your guest today.
So the European Union is a key partner to the government of the Gambia and in Africa in general. So we will take it up to us to the dawn of democracy, new phase of democracy in the Gambia. Where did the European Union pick it up with the government of the Gambia, with Gambia as a country? Mr. Ambassador, now it is a new dispensation in the Gambia. Since then, we've seen the European Union in the forefront trying to, you know, heighten the hopes of Gambian as to the new phase. Where did you pick it up?
Well, thank you for the question indeed. The Gambia-EU relationship or partnership dates back more than 4 decades. And of course, like in such a long time, there are different phases. When I arrived in 2016, end of January 2016, which is before the political changes, I can tell you that the partnership wasn't really vivid, wasn't really dynamic. To the contrary, a lot of support was withheld. So for us, the decision of the Gambian people in 2016 at the presidential election was like a new start of a new phase of the partnership. And because of the democratic changes, the European Union felt necessary to support this democratization process. That's why we partnered with the Gambian government, of course, with the country as a whole, to support this very difficult transition period. This transition period is not yet over. However, we are now confronted with an unprecedented challenge, a crisis which is much more than just a health crisis, which is also a very severe economic crisis and tremendous devastating socio-economic consequences.
Yeah, and right now it is the EU in the Gambia, and the delegation is well established. Could you just describe as to the nature of EU presence in the Gambia?
Thank you for the question, because most of the time the news are focusing on the EU development assistance, and I'm very proud to also share information with your viewers as to who are behind delivering all these supports. When I came here, I am the first ever resident ambassador from the European Union. So the EU delegation in Banjul used to be so-called regionalized. The ambassador was actually resident in Dakar. When I arrived, we also started a capacity building for the delegation itself. From the strengths of 13, all included, back in 2016, we are now up to 26 posts, both local agent posts as well as expatriates. And they are the people behind every action we make. They are the one who do the necessary arrangements, very bureaucratic sometimes, to make sure that the different assistance the European Union promised, Commissioner Mimica promised back then, is in fact delivered to the country.
Yeah, and in terms of structures and organizational presence, who is here and for what reason?
Well, within the delegation as such, we are structured like any embassy. We have a small political section, we have a much larger, much robust so-called development cooperation section, and of course, like in any organization, you have an administrative chunk of the delegation. We have heads of sectors in the different positions, and I am the one running the show as head of the
ambassador. So, and right now it is the situation of COVID-19, and then the whole world is affected. Now you have Europe, all over, all continents have been struggling with the issue of COVID-19. So with the ambassador here, maybe we want to know as to the measures in place to respond to this global pandemic while you're in Gambia as a delegation.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think the challenge here at this pandemic, or at the beginning of the pandemic, was to make sure we arrange a response, each member states in the Union, as well as the Union as a whole, with its partner countries like the Gambia, that we enable ourselves to give a proportionate response to the danger ahead, to this pandemic. This response, of course, is pretty wide, in the sense that on the one hand you have the immediate challenge of the health crisis, confirmed cases, community transmission of the pandemic, so necessary resources had to be allocated for addressing that. At the same time, we also need to look at the system in place, the national health system, sanitary, water, etc. And last but not least, there is a component which is gradually, increasingly more and more important, and that is to address the consequences of the crisis. So when the European Union decided to give a global response to this global challenge, we took stock as to what we can really do as a whole, as a European Union. And then when it was announced, of course, we also announced the different packages, so to say, whereby we support the host country, the partner country actors in their fight against the pandemic. So for the Gambia, we actually reviewed all the ongoing development assistance we have been delivering since 2017, with the aim to identify what can be redirected to somehow directly support the government in its effort to fight the pandemic. And then we also looked at the financial aspects to see and identify any funds, financial funds, which could be reoriented again to support the Gambia in their fight against the pandemic. And last but not least, we also looked at what additional things could we possibly do. Now, when we finished this revision in March and then announced the so-called Team Europe package, which is roughly 45 million euro worth of development assistance, which would be directly or indirectly assisting the Gambia in the fight against the pandemic. This package includes many different action items. Of course, the biggest chunk is budgetary support. So what we have done is to look at what was the budgetary support foreseen for this year and next year.
Yeah, exactly, because when it comes to the budgetary support, we see that the EU allocates, gives some to the government of the Gambia annually. So but how much is allocated for 2020, or what is the baseline for this amount?
Actually, what we did in this review was to front load, make arrangements, possibility to front load all the budgetary support which was foreseen for this and next year, so for 20 and 21. As a result of that, 9 million emergency budgetary support was already dispersed by 30th of April. And then the next disbursement will take place probably in August, 22.5 million euro. Budgetary support from treasury to treasury. Let me emphasize here that all these arrangements were done at a time when the European Union and its member states were extremely deep in the crisis in Europe. March, April, that was when Europe was hardest hit by the crisis. Nevertheless, we were thinking of our partners because we firmly believe that only a global response, only a collective response could really lead to the victory against this pandemic. So the budgetary support which was foreseen for these 2 years has been front-loaded. With that including, we are talking about roughly over 130 million euro budgetary support, which was in total dispersed to the Gambian government, to the Gambian treasury. And this is because, you may recall, in 2017, when the changes started, we had a support package for the Gambia when we envisaged a certain amount of development assistance. That total assistance for the 3 years, 17, 18, 19, 20 and 21, that was in a total of 365 million, out of which we are talking about roughly 30%, which will come in the form of budgetary support. Now it's important to underline that when it comes to assistance, you have to look at what are your legal possibilities. So, for example, if I concluded a contract with the, let's say, WHO or the World Food Programme, I cannot just simply change that contract. We will have to remain within the legal framework of the contract and make reorientation to somehow make it responding to COVID needs. And this is what we did with many other interventions.
So yeah, just, that is a very important point, especially the budgetary support. We've seen the disbursement coming one after another allocation, and the latest one, like you said, end of April, we show that 9 million euros is pumped in. So, but what is the situation that Gambia lives in to deserve such support from EU, or what is the condition around the budgetary support?
Okay, the budgetary support was agreed to be coming in a roughly annual disbursement right from the beginning. So we made an agreement with the government on that. We also agreed that preconditions are such which we jointly establish with the Gambian government, so they are achievable. They are also objectives which helps the Gambian transition to progress. The people decided, the Gambia has decided in 2016, so we will have to deliver on those promises, and this is what we have been doing. Now, for the coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic specific arrangements, of course we were challenged by the fact that the Gambian government, as any governments in the world, they needed fiscal space. They needed sufficient financial means to organize their fight against the pandemic in country. And that's why this 9 million had very little benchmark, so to say, to achieve. As long, in very simple terms, as long as Gambia remains on the democratic path, as long as Gambia makes progress in the most strategic democratic changes, constitutional reform, legal reform, etc., as long as it takes place, the European Union is interested in delivering the further assistance as we planned. The challenge here now is the fact that the European Union, like any government, we are working in budgetary fiscal years. The difference is that in the Gambia, you have one budgetary year, which is like a 12-month period, whereas in the European Union, we have so-called 7 years cycles. Now, the development assistance the European Union promised the Gambia back in 2017 were under the current multi-financial framework. And this multi-financial framework comes to an end by end 2021. So financial means available now today, they are the ones we can spend. So we cannot spend money we don't have. So that's why we had to review what is the assistance package we are delivering and adjusted them accordingly. Of course, the development cooperation between the European Union and the Gambia will not stop just because the budgetary term will come to an end. There are already negotiations ongoing in the European Union machinery as to how the next multi-annual financial framework will look like, what will be the next EU budget, an important component of which will still remain for the development assistance to many countries in Africa and elsewhere, including, of course, the Gambia.
When EU announced allocation of budget to countries like the Gambia, what does it mean? Does it mean the money is already in Gambia Central Bank already?
No.
How does it work?
The European Union budget is taxpayers' money, taxpayers from 27 member states. So there is a very rigorous, if you wish, bureaucratic way of allocating money, programming money, and eventually spending money. There are different types of interventions. One is the budgetary support, which indeed means cash from treasury to treasury. In the case of Gambia, this is what I mentioned before. Another very popular type of development assistance is doing certain kinds of programs and projects. These programs and projects are designed jointly with Gambian partners, state and non-state actors. They are supposed to complement the national development plan of the country. So when it comes to project intervention, we conclude a contract, a project contract with a lead institution. It could be a state actor, it could be a UN agency, it could be an international organization, it could be NGO, it could be INGO, depending on the profile. We have several such projects with several partners, and then the funding, the budget of the project is allocated to the partner gradually. So no one receives the entire budget of the project up front and can go easy about it. The system whereby we are monitoring the budget allocation and the expenditure of execution of project budget is also very rigorous, and this is because of transparency and accountability reasons we have to apply. After all, these are taxpayers' money, so we got to be very clear on what we are sending and how we are spending it.
Well, viewers, this is the TOP-3 program. You are reminded that, and with me is the EU ambassador to the Gambia, discussing on the EU-Gambia relationship and, COVID-19, the war against COVID-19, the role of each partner in this situation. So with me is the big man himself, and then actually, so you know that from the 4th of May, every 2 days there is a press release coming from the EU. The 4th of May, you mentioned about the $30 million, which is about 550,000 euros, which is for technical assistance. And 2 days later, it was about the 1 million euros, $73 million. which goes to the coastline and marine zone protection in resilience to climate change. But we have another one that was on the 11th, which was about the promotion of investment in the field of arts and music, sports. But let's just start with the technical assistance. So here it sounds like an army of EU development experts going to be present in the Gambia for what is the nature of this technical work?
Let me start by saying, because as you were explaining what happened the past couple of weeks, I just put on the table some of the press releases, what you actually read and you are talking about. This is exactly the result of our reviewing the ongoing projects we have been having in the Gambia and trying to refocus, reorientate to the extent possible some of these projects in order to make sure that the project output assists, complements what the country is doing as a whole regarding the fight against this pandemic. Now, the different press releases are what we call it in a internal jargon, the COVIDization of our project interventions. These projects are ongoing. They have been ongoing, so this is not something starting new, perhaps except the one with the GCCI. I will come back on that later. The importance of this is that these projects either somehow got reorientated or additional funds were made available to them so they can deliver better and more for the benefit of the country, for the benefit of the population. Since you mentioned technical assistance, indeed it's important that on one hand technical expertise is available for the country, for the different state actors, but at the same time it is also important that non-COVID related developments are also taking place in spite of the fact that the pandemic caused a crisis. Just a simple example, legal reform, constitutional reform. These are all strategically important objectives to make sure that they take place, that they are achieved, so the Gambian democratic transition will not stop. When it comes to specific project intervention, of course, it was also for us important to try to find ways whereby the average Gambian, the individual, will feel something about it.
Okay.
So it's not just, you talk about 9 million budgetary support. For me as a humble citizen, this is not really imaginable. This is so big number, so many zeros at the end, you don't really feel it. Whereas in some of the projects, we want to make sure that the population, the average, those in poverty, they feel about it. I tell you,
because at the end of the day, also we know each of these projects cost money, and there's a figure attached to them. But not the money that is allocated in the name of the Gambia through these projects, various projects. Is there, monitoring mechanism in place? What is it like at the EU to make sure that the plans are executed accordingly?
Exactly. That's the most important aspect of every project, to have the desired objectives achieved and in a sustainable manner. Every project, individual project, is monitored, has been monitored. We have project managers at the delegation who are in contact with the project partner who implements the project. Every project has got a work plan, a plan of activities with different deliverables for each and every item of activity. And this is what we're monitoring. Please keep in mind that for every project there is a steering committee. The steering committee includes, of course, the project partners, representatives, includes representatives of beneficiary, includes representatives from government or state actors. Some of the project steering committees are high level. You even have ministers attending such meetings. Other projects more practical, but they still have representatives from the local governance, for example. This is the steering committee responsibility to make sure that the project plan is implemented. Now, at the end of the day, all these projects are based on a contract. So let's say we sign a contract. You undertake as a contractor that you're going to deliver this project. In the meantime, at regular intervals, there is revision, monitoring of your activities, and at the end, each and every project goes through a specific third-party auditing, which means if the project objectives were not achieved, if you spend the money on something else, we have legal means, and it's inbuilt in the contract, to get the money back. We can also do that along the implementation. I think we have to keep in mind the importance of a project is to be implemented so the objectives are achieved.
Okay. And
this is what we have to ensure throughout the life cycle of the project.
yeah, and EU-Gambia relationship is largely subject to Article 8 of Cotonou Agreement, which advocates for political dialogue. How has it been between EU and Gambia?
Oh, it's now a big jump, but I welcome that because indeed the Cotonou Agreement has been the legal basis for partnership between the European Union and African, Caribbean and Pacific countries. This legal framework envisaged basically 3 areas of cooperation. One is the political cooperation you are asking now, the other is the development cooperation, and third is trade. It's important to underline that each segments are equally important. A real partnership cannot be missing any of these. Now, when it comes to the political cooperation, indeed, this government in 2017 brought a change in the quality of political cooperation between the European Union and the Gambia. We held the article you referred to, Article 8 of the Cotonou Agreement. We held so-called political dialogues, which is to be held annually. We held it in 2017, we held it in 2018. Unfortunately, last year, we just couldn't find a suitable date whereby the cabinet or the government could be represented and also European Union and member states could be represented. We are aiming for a Article 8 political dialogue sometime this year. Yet again, under the COVID conditions, it is extremely challenging to organize such
what must
a
have
meeting.
been responsible for last year's skipping, maybe?
Well, basically it was agenda conflicts, time conflicts. You may know that in Banjul we only have very few European member states represented. We only have the French chargé d'affaires, the German chargé d'affaires, the Spanish. Rest of the member states are actually resident in Dakar. So for an Article 8 political dialogue, we would also need member state ambassadors attending the meeting, and this makes it complicated. On the other hand, the Gambian government also had a tremendously busy schedule. A lot of cabinet ministers traveling and other international engagements. So last year we just couldn't fix the date. I do hope, even before this pandemic will be over, we will be able to host a political dialogue meeting. But remember, this lack of political dialogue meeting last year doesn't mean that there is no dialogue between the European Union and member states and the Gambian government. Let me just clarify. A political dialogue is a comprehensive sitting together and discussing issues, whereas with different line ministries, whereas with different state and non-state actors, we have carried out dozens and dozens of so-called policy dialogues. That is when you speak about one exact subject, fisheries, agriculture, whatever it is. Whereas in the political dialogue, you have a comprehensive approach to strategic level issues.
Okay. Quickly, let's look at reforms now, because you know EU has been very actively involved in the political reform in the Gambia since the coming of the new dispensation, particularly. And initially, it started with the welcoming of the ECOWAS sub-regional intervention, and EU had a role to play in terms of funding and then logistics. How has that fared?
Well, there is a wisdom saying that democracy comes with a price. And indeed, it was a regional decision by ECOWAS member states, which has got nothing to do with the European Union in the sense that we are not participating in such decision makings. And the decision was to keep the intervention force in the country to monitor the transformation of the country. Now, for us, international community, it was also a prudent approach to make sure that this young democracy is not left alone. Remember, Gambia is coming from an autocratic structuring, an autocratic way of operation as a state, with a heavily used and excessively used security capacity. And now it is entering a stage whereby democracy is the name of the game and civil control over the security forces are to be achieved. In this transition, it was important that there is no unnecessary risk taken. That's why when ECOWAS decided to keep economic forces in the country, and ECOWAS approached the European Union to consider funding the mission of the ECOWAS economic forces, ECOWAS troops, the European Union has always considered it positively, which practically means that up until end of March this year, from practically March of 2017, every single mandate of the economic in the Gambia was funded by the European Union government. Sorry, by the European Union, and then this support was not channeled to the government but to ECOWAS headquarters in Abuja.
Logistically, how much does this cost the EU for this to happen?
I will have to do a quick calculation because the first budget was roughly 8 million, and then came the second year budget, which was roughly 14 million, and then came the last half a year mission, which was in the tune of 7 million. So if you add it up, it's somewhere around 29 million euro in total. The current new mandate of ECOMIG is not yet sponsored by the Union, and this is because we have not received yet requests from ECOWAS headquarters about consider funding.
But EU will consider continuing the support to keep the economic forces in the Gambia should the ECOWAS request for it.
I cannot preempt the decision of the member states in Brussels at the EU forum.
How do you think the member state will see such a request to happen after 3 years of a country in transition?
Indeed, a very sharp question, and this is what we will be looking at. One thing is sure, and let's not take into consideration the pandemic circumstances, okay? If we look at the duration of the economic forces here, what was the original aim with that? The original aim of sponsoring the economic troops was to make sure that there is a security in the country which can control the situation should something go wrong. And at the same time, the Gambian forces, the Gambian security apparatus, the so-called Gambian security sector, is reformed. And these two, economic in the country and reforming of the security sector in the Gambia, should have been going hand in hand, parallel with each other, in order for the Gambian security sector to eventually take over the responsibility of the security in the country. Now, whilst on one hand the economic forces has been here and has been carrying out their mandate, and the European Union has been massively supporting that, funding that entirely, at the same time the security sector reform in the country did not progress as it was expected and envisaged.
Are you informed as to
various different reasons?
Are you informed as to the reason why it is so slow, and this has been a concern for the EU that security sector reform is something that should kickstart? It should be among the leading, factors to real transition. Well,
the way we see it, and yet again, this is a European perspective, the way we see it, it seems that the beyond the firm political commitment from His Excellency President Barrow, from the government, there was no real engagement on the Gambian side to make visible, tangible reforms. At the same time, we also have to acknowledge that very serious policy-making work has been going on. Remember, the SSR was launched in late summer 2017, and then Office of National Security has been established. The National Security Advisor has been appointed. Strategic documents like the National Security Policy of the country have been drafted. Now they are about to finish the strategies for the security sector reform and national security. So a lot of drafting and such changes, developments did occur. I have to underline and admit that. What we feel is that from a perspective of the population, the reforms so far achieved are either non-visible or they are not really tangible for the population as a whole. We did, as part of the EU support from the SSR, we also did a mapping and auditing the sector and the different institutions. We contracted a center of excellence in Geneva called the DCAF, the Democratic Control of Armed Forces. It's an internationally acknowledged institution of excellence. And they came here to make an assessment, so-called human resources assessment of the different institutions. With this aim, we wanted to help the government to make informed decision, because an audit can really provide you with a X-ray of what your institution look like, what are the pros and cons, good and bad things, and based on that knowledge you can make an informed decision as to how to reform the institution.
And the same thing applies to the constitutional reform. We're talking about the transitional justice are all going at the same time. Have you also been looking into the process, and what is your reaction as to, because you are a partner in the reform promotion?
It's a big jump. It's a big jump, like in a roller coaster. Transitional justice. I think the Gambia has been extremely exemplary by international standards about the achievement, progress in the transitional justice process. Within this transitional justice process, we talk about the constitutional review process. Everybody knows the state of play. A new draft constitution has been drafted. Now it's under consideration by the executive, and then later on it will go to National Assembly. I think this process in itself, under such short time and circumstances, I think it's really applaudable. Beside that, remember, we have the TRC process, the Truth and Reconciliation process, which also achieved a tremendous upload from all over the world, because it shows an extremely serious process where you have all the actors engaging. And in both of the processes, TRC and CRC, what is absolutely striking to see how much civil society leads this, how much civil society buys into it and make it move. It is also exemplary to see how these processes were put on track so they can get started, and that was the responsibility of the Gambian government. And I have to say chapeau for the government, because they did a good job by launching these processes, which also means providing them with necessary funding and budget. As we could see the great progress in this transitional justice process, this shows what is the potential in the country. This shows to us, international community, how much able the country is in achieving reforms. But of course, we got to keep in mind that this window of opportunity is not open forever. These reforms got to go gradually, progressively, within a short-term period of time, because after all, the mandate of this government under this presidency is to make sure by the next election that is a reformed country, which means new constitution, legal reforms, a lot of changes.
Okay,
And this
I'll
is
get back to
extremely
that, Ambassador, and just to remind the listeners that, and viewers, this is the top 3 iAfrica TV that is providing you this live coverage with EU Ambassador to the Gambia, Atita Lajos. Right now, what we will just do is to go a bit of regional and sub-regional issues, where Ambassador will look into also European Union interest in Africa in general. We've seen for the case of the Gambia, there is a fishing deal with the Gambia, which even there some commentators will say that, you know, should not have happened, you know, in the Afrocentric view. So what would EU continue to say around having, you know, business in Africa, especially with the fishing deal?
I will come to that. For the European Union and its member states, Africa is in our neighborhood. So for us, even if it is not the most direct neighborhood, but let's say the second neighborhood. Geographically speaking, historically speaking, there is a lot of ties between the two continents. Looking at the direction where the whole world is going, there is no doubt that this partnership needs to be further nourished and enhanced. Now, I was sure about this sustainable fishing partnership you will raise. I think here we are confronted with a certain degree of lack of information for many readers. Gambia was the last country in the whole region, in the ECOWAS family, with which the European Union could indeed conclude a fisheries partnership agreement. This is not only about fishing. The most important component, as I see it, and for our future, is the way that it is clearly regulates what can be fished and where by any European company. That's important because what's happening along the coast of Gambia, we all know. There is a tremendous amount of illegal fishing going on. And let me not name the countries of origin of all those illegal fishermen or companies.
You can name them, you're free.
It's a free country indeed. As far as I could read from the reports, we are talking about neighboring countries. We are talking about countries from far away like China. And I think this is exactly a question, whether the Gambia wants to partner with countries who apply laws and rules, and the fisheries partnership agreement is a set of rules. But more importantly, under this partnership agreement, the Gambia will receive and has been receiving support, both technical assistance as well as financial support for preserving the artisanal fishing in the Gambian waters. And this is something which hasn't really been supported in the past many decades. And I'm very proud to say that because we also believe that if we don't do fishing in a sustainable manner all over the globe, we will ruin our waters. We will ruin the fish stock we have in our waters. That is not acceptable because the European Union is very keen on looking into the future after recovering from this pandemic and making transitions to have a green deal in the future, to have our way of life in a sustainable manner which does not give more harm to the planet. We are running out of resources, so I think we are in the 24th hour of the day to make a change as to how we operate. Now, for me, a partnership agreement which provides support for the sector to develop, which provides fiscal space for the government and state organs to organize their work, because as to how and what the Gambian government wishes to spend the support component for the artisanal sector is entirely up to the government. Yeah. I do believe it's a fair deal.
So, because fishing experts in the Gambia will argue that yes, it is good to do business with the EU, looking at the merits of it, they've been together for so long. And the amount of budgetary support and other technical services that the EU offers to the Gambia and all of a sudden they would see EU is interested in fishing, would have been rather showing Gambian how to fish, and then eventually would there be a transition as to having Africa be in charge of the security of the marines?
Let's clarify. I mean, this is not the first fishery agreement between the European Union and or member states and the Gambia. There was a fisheries agreement concluded some 20 plus years ago, which then went dormant. So that's why there was non-active legal framework for fishing. In the agreement, it is clearly stated how any of the parties could terminate the agreement. I mean, if the Gambia decides tomorrow, if that's the choice of the people, of the National Assembly, government, whoever, to terminate the contract, it will be terminated. So it's not enforced upon the Gambia. Let me, however, ask you the question. If such fisheries partnership agreement has been considered good for all the ECOWAS countries having a border with the Atlantic Ocean, why would the Gambia be the only one not benefiting from it? Isn't it strange that 14 other ECOWAS member states had already concluded such a sustainable fisheries partnership agreement with the European Union much earlier than the Gambia did?
So this also takes me to the next question. You know, if you look at EU relationship with Africa, so there is a bit of affinity with individual countries than regional blocs, like ECOWAS talks about trade among themselves. You have the AU, these are structures, but for EU now, don't you think that the affinity is closer to individual countries in terms of relationship?
Since we are celebrating the 70th birthday of the European Union, I can tell you one thing. The European Union itself, as it is now today, it is an unprecedented success of regional integration. When the European Union was started 70 years ago, it was to make sure that we work and grow in solidarity, in peace, in unity, to avoid another war among the European nations. But then, by time, it matured much further. There were different phases of the European Union integration. So what I see is that European Union, as an example, is inspiring for many regions. No surprise that we talk about African Union, we talk about ECOWAS, which is a mini union on the African continent or within the African Union, which is driven by the same objectives or similar objectives like was the case of the European Union. What is the point there? And I think these points are also the aspects which made the European Union successful. I would say three things for the European Union perspective. Single market, a common economic interest. The European Union single market is the largest single market on the world. Second, democracy. Third, respect for rule of law. The combination of these three elements is, I think, the very core of the European Union success. Now, we are happy to see, and we are actually encouraging, for example, ECOWAS, to further promote this economic union of the member states, because we truly believe in regional integration. Of course, any union is composed of member states, and member states, they still have their individual national interest. And I think the two are not contradicting. If they were contradicting, we wouldn't be celebrating the 70th birthday of the European Union. We have 28. Up until February, we had 28 member states. Now we have 27. These are 27 member states with different national interests. Yet unity can be achieved. We truly believe in unity in diversity.
And the relationship that EU is celebrating with individual African countries, plus some of the blocs or all of them, how would this also help in terms of addressing the ongoing crisis like the migration issues? We know the EU has a mission in the Mediterranean Sea, but it doesn't stop the casualties, the serious crisis of migrants, especially from Africa, both in the sea and even in Europe. How is it supposed to address such situations?
Well, this is a very difficult issue. We truly believe in the right for migration for an individual. What we are actually fighting against is illegal, unregulated migration, especially when it is influenced or arranged or managed by different illegal activities, trafficking in human, children trafficking, etc. What we could see in the past, I would say, good 5 to 8 years, and then in this migration flow you had peaks, ups and downs. At the beginning it was really a concern to save people, to save the migrants, because we could hear in the media, in the news, how many of them either died while en route or were subject to various misuse, breaches of human rights, torturing, slavery in the 21st century. So one of the actions the European Union decided to do is to fight all these illegal components. Now, let me just remind your kind viewers that since February 2017 till today, with the European Union assistance, roughly 5,000 Gambians returned to the country voluntarily. Those who got stranded along the backway, whether it is in Libya or Niger or elsewhere. Unfortunately, far too many died in the Mediterranean and along the route. We only come to know those deaths who are detected, and there is a huge number who are not detected. Whilst in the past couple of years we were confronted with the challenge of migration, exodus of people, now we are confronted with the challenge of how to reintegrate those returned. For me, it's reassuring to see that we have meaningful partnership with the Gambia, in the sense that we are working together on reintegration programs, reintegration packages, skills development, assisting employment, etc. This issue of migration management is a joint interest. It is in the interest of the country in the sense that this country needs to be built, rebuilt. I think if you are losing your workforce, the most capable men and women between the age of 20 and 50, if you lose them, who's going to build up this country? So Gambia needs a labor force to build this country up. On the other hand, we will also have to explore possibilities for legal migration. Up until now, the number of so-called forced returnees, those who were deported from European countries after exhausting all their legal possibilities to obtain a work permit or residence permit, so they were decided to be returned, those numbers are extremely low. They are in the few hundreds compared to the 5,000. So we cannot really talk about a massive deportation of Gambians from European countries. Right
a bit
now,
of reception, because EU believes in procedures and then human rights, but the reception of with some of these migrants from Africa in Europe in different situations, as we see in the news daily, is appealing. Some of them, so
the way they live in Europe,
the way they live, the way they are being, treated. Africans say all sort of things, and they experience a lot of difficulties in Europe because they have gone through the irregular route to Europe.
That was their choice, and I am afraid to quite a degree there was misinformation. There was a misperception of how easy such a backway could be. This was also coupled with a lot of criminal activities, misuse of the situation of the migrants, and that's why we are not in favor of such irregular migration. Of course, we got to make a difference between those who are escaping from war, who are escaping from dangerous circumstances. Look at what's happening in the Middle East, in Syria, elsewhere, or those who are starving and there is famine hit the country. Differentiate those from those who are migrating for economic reasons. Nonetheless, we do believe in rule of law. So when you enter a country, and if you cannot regularize your situation, your legal status in the country, that means you will be returned back to your home country. I think this is also what any country is doing in the world. Controlling those who can enter the country, making sure that they don't pose unnecessary threat to the stability in the country, be it in terms of rule of law, in terms of social services, whatever. One thing is sure, we are destined to work solutions out together. And this is what we have been doing. Of course, since the pandemic started, there is no return operation whatsoever. I hope the back way is also suspended, but I just do hope, because we don't really have reliable figures regarding that. And I also am true that this challenge will remain with us for the next couple of years. Also because the consequences, the socio-economic consequences of this pandemic are, I'm afraid, will be devastating. And it's very difficult to make prognosis now. But the figures I read about the consequences are really scary, which means circumstances in countries like the Gambia will not improve in the very near future. Therefore, it could also trigger new generations to decide on migration.
Let's talk about ECOWAS as a point of final touches for the program. And ECOWAS talks about the introduction of the eco currency, and the idea is to value it against the euro. So how admissible is the euro for this?
Well, I can only congratulate ECOWAS for making such giant and very ambitious steps. Again, as I said, we truly believe in a single market in the European Union, but it also took some years, some decades actually, in the kind of evolution of the European Union before the euro was introduced as a common currency. Yet again, as we speak today, not every European Union member state is using euro as an official currency. There are still a few member states who are using their own currencies. I personally am a believer in the single market and the joint currency. I think the most important aspect is to make sure that when the currency is introduced and be started to be used by member states in the ECOWAS region, that all the financial and economic circumstances are there to make sure that this introduction of the common currency will be sustainable. I'm not an expert in finances, so I would refrain from telling smart ideas about what are these preconditions. But one thing is sure, it could make the region progress more in prosperity and development in general. So I keep my fingers crossed for the common currency of the ECOWAS countries, and we will have to see by time how it evolves.
Okay, so we just quickly, maybe final questions that I will ask you. It is COVID-19, and then after a series of announcement of some of your activities, we now have a number of press releases coming. So what is likely to be the immediate next step from the EU delegation to the Gambia?
Well, the immediate next step is to make sure that we implement all these modifications in the different projects. That is to make sure that we have results reaching the people. I tell you one example. If we say feeder road project, if we increase the labor in fulfilling the different road constructions or rehabilitations, that means a lot of family, a lot of household will have an income. I'm crazy for that. If we look at the breast project, whereby there is a cash transfer from the project to the lactating mothers and mothers with young children, if we can increase the number of families who receive such a support on a monthly basis, I'm crazy for that. If we look at the latest one, the €500,000 project with the Gambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, if via their project we can invest into the creative sector of the Gambia, that will mean that under the pandemic-caused very harsh economic situations, artists could still make a living. And Gambia could still be better prepared for post-crisis when the tourists will come back. Now, if we can really push in these directions, I forgot to mention, but perhaps just one very short brief mentioning. You talked about migration.
Yeah.
We talked about reintegration projects. We have the Youth Empowerment Project. We have the IOM joint initiative, whereby we also try to give a chance for returnees to do something good for the country. So we will have tailors trained by these projects who are returnees doing personal protective suits as tailors. I mean, if this delivers a product for the use of the national health system while keeping these young Gambians happy and they have a bread on the table for the family, I think it's a great achievement. If we look at the potential in the youth, in the younger component of the society, for me it's amazing to see how many talents we have in this country. So I think as long as we can deliver more and more tangible to the population, I think then we are achieving a great deal.
Going by your support and relation between the EU and Gambia, so these kind of projects have been going on for so long, and they tend to address a lot of short-term, initiative. But why is the industrial revolution in Africa and Gambia in particular still pending?
Well, we have to make it very clear. Development assistance, development aid is not going to industrialize your country. For that, you need investment and private sector. Now, the GCCI project, we are also addressing a component of supporting the investment environment, but this is where the tango takes two. Also, the government has to put something there. When we talk about the big issues like legal reform, one component of the legal reform has to be the modification of all those laws and rules which could make the Gambia more attractive in the eyes of foreign investors from Africa, from the region, from Europe, from wherever. If the Gambia doesn't changes this overall legal system around business, Gambia will not be attractive. Consequently, there will be no investment coming here. And this is what we have to avoid. This is what we have to make sure. Now, once you have a booming private sector, booming business, that will bring along the industrialization or industrial revolution as you formulated. For that, we from the European Union development assistance perspective, we can help the government, the state, to prepare certain regulatory framework. But it's the private sector who could really make a change in that.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We now leave it there. So, viewers, this was the top 3 for today's edition. It was a pleasure having you there. My name is Ibrahim Ba, and it was with me, Ambassador Attila Lajos, who is Ambassador of EU to the Gambia for the past 1 hour. So, it was a pleasure having you, and I tell you to continue tuning to iAfrica. Next in the agenda is news shortly, so stay with us with iAfrica.tv. Bye bye for now.
Thank you.
Have your say.
Fellow Gambians, my government has approved a $500 million emergency fund, which the Ministries of Health and Finance will work on for disbursement and use to fight COVID-19 menace.
xaalis bi tege yomb na waaye xam lu jafe mooy séddale bi niñ ko séddalee ak ndax danañ ko jox ñi ko yeeyoo wala duñ leen ko jox loolu moo jara laajte.
cos loo xam ne la nit yee tax ñu joxe ko te nit ñi ñoo leen fa teg te xaalis nit yi la comme xaalis yi population bi la wax dëgg yàlla li gënoon mooy ku nekk a gis sa boppa
man su ma sañoon daal ñu séddoo ko nu mu waroo buñ si def xaaj loo ñii diw nañ ko si ku nekk loo war a am nga am ko.
askan bi seen dem ak dikk bu ñu wàññee mu jël ko def ko si loolu noonu participer ko si loolu noonu ba nga xam ne danañ mën a ànd ak moom si wàññi suñ dem ak suñ dikk.
génne leen xaalis bi nañ ko génnee ñu def ko ñu defar suñu réew mi defar réew nag da nga koy commencé njàng mu baax nit ñi di faju feebar di faju tan feebar di faju dafa xemul kombo loolu affaire bi du kombo rek nañ génne ci àll bi yëpp ñu defar fa hôpital li war man mi nekk kombo moo war ka nekk fototo moo war ka nekk Pokaw Njóogu moo war ko nekk feneen.
waaye nit doo ko mën a wax mu teg këram joxuloo ko dara lu mu lekk soo ñun balaa corona dañu rey xiif moo ñoo rey.
nguur bi su nekkee ne 500 millions Gambie ñaata population bi ñu ñaata lañ.
2 point or 1 point.
ok 2 point boobu noonu su nekkee dañ ko war a séddale si nit ñi ku nekk ñaata la war a am.
million su bëri soosu noonu nañ ko xaaj jox xel benn xaaf ñu téyegum ñu jël beneen xaaf bi yóbbu ko ci communauté bi ñu téyegum.
o silang ni nga arda koye bulu courant lu sotota ani borolu sayin pentanlu panande ñante hakkilo faylol fanan kanne
ya fo ko ngata si suwo kono ha man sala million be maburu nga bulo kono man sana la kuol bebe kuo be kala jeto hana ñil min fankana fontolen ko ngata si suwo kono fo to man tara man sa do kuol nin karo fate man tara kejo
xaalis boobu dañ ko war a xaaj ñu jël xaaj bi dugal ko si wérugu yaram bi ñaareel xaaj bi dugal ko si askan bi.
Have your say.
baadiŋol men be Gambia aniŋ Gambia e bantala mbe ŋa ñiŋ loŋ ko TRRC bala dookuwo sal labaŋo le kono andi la dookuwo be looriŋ meŋ kaŋ wo leŋ hadamadiŋol meŋ na ñantoo tiñaata ñiŋ bankoo kaŋ jaŋ kabiriŋ July karo 1994 saŋo la kana January karo 2017 saŋo la woto momo ye a loŋ ko i mantorata ñiŋ waatoo kono andi maŋ futa TRRC folo pour que la kumakaŋo di nsaafo ma ye statement o ye feere ke ye futa TRRC ye la kumakaŋo di a tariya ñaama yo pour kana TRRC ye feŋo feŋ ke naŋ paasoo ti kana futa je walla ye feŋo feŋ dépense pour ka futa TRRC ke la kumakaŋo di a be seyindileema le bari mbe ñiŋ fanaŋ koyindi la ko pour ka statement o fanaŋ di a maŋ ke ko moo ye la kumakaŋo di TRRC i be loo la télévisionoo ñaato le moo be ye juubee wo tuteete le bulu niŋ lefta ka testify moo be ye lamoyi moo be ye je i se wo kenoo le bari niŋ maŋ lafi wo fanaŋ na i se kumakaŋo diinoo le a ye tara moolu ke kaŋo moyi bari ite ñaadaa je la niŋ duŋ maŋ lafi wo fanaŋ na i se siinoo i niŋ commissionnal damma ali ye kacca a ye tara moo te bole kalama andu niŋ me lafita ka ñiŋ ke i se katoo ke ye ñiŋ téléphone nombal kumandi pour ka TRRC soto no 770-4988 770-4988 wala 741-5937 741-5937 ala baraka mo be sa dake TRRC